Y and the Last Man, Volume 9, Motherland, written by Brian K. Vaughan and art by Pia Guerra and Goran Sudzuka. All right, Volume 9, only one volume left after this to celebrate the conclusion of this series. Next week's video is going to be a little bit special. We're going to do a premiere video live stream. So if you want to be a part of that, be here next week, Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, and we can watch the video together in real time and live chat our thoughts on the conclusion. And Volume 10 is, it's going to have to wrap everything up. And it's going to be very, very big. And Volume 10 is where the series really got a lot of critical acclaim. It got nominated for a Hugo Award for Best Graphic Story, and it finally won the Eisner for Best Continuing Series for the work in Volume 10 and how the series wrapped up. So, very big things in next week's video. Also, I'm going to announce what series I'm going to do next. So, you're going to want to see what that's going to be. Now, before we get into Volume 10, we got to get through Volume 9. And this volume is very important. There's going to be lots of big reveals and lots of big questions answered. Yorick and his crew finally arrive in China to Dr. Ming's lab, where lots of stuff is going to go down. Let's dive into the story for Volume 9, Motherland. Issue 49, Motherland, Part 1. This issue opens with Yorick having a funky dream. He is in some sort of 1940s gangster film, Tommy gunning people. Beth is tied up. She warns Yorick something ain't right with her. She warns him that we'll never have Paris as she gets sucked into some sort of portal. Yorick, he wakes up from his dream. Ampersand is on his stomach, and that other monkey, Bonnie, is throwing her crap at Ampersand. Rose, now awake, she's been out of it and sleeping and recovering the last several days from her stab wound, but she is now up and about and walking around, and Rose tells Yorick Bonnie is flirting with Ampersand. That's why she's throwing her shit at him. She's playing hard to get. Yorick is hoping that Ampersand and Bonnie are going to have sex, and Ampersand gets Bonnie pregnant because Dr. Mann thinks that Ampersand can pass whatever immunity he has onto his offspring. If that's the case, then Yorick can take Ampersand with him, and Dr. Mann can take the baby monkey with her. See, Dr. Mann, she wants to press onto Hong Kong, but 355 and Yorick are thinking of going to France so Yorick can finally unite with Beth. But Yorick wants to take Ampersand with him. Now, Rose says that she needs to talk with Allison, but Yorick tells her that 355 and Allison should be back from their shopping spree soon. They are getting some things for Yorick and 355's going away dinner. We jump over to 355 and Allison. They are in Shenzhen, China. The city is very close to bordering Hong Kong. The two of them talk about China's one-child policy, which is a birth planning program China adopted in the early 1980s in order to limit most Chinese families to one child each. The policy was enacted to address the growth rate of the country's population, which the government viewed as being too rapid. A lot of families ended up aborting their girls to make sure their only child was a male. Because of this, the gender balance in the country was about 120 boys for every 100 girls. Allison says, this place was on the cusp of massive crime waves and huge social unrest. It always happens when there are significantly more guys than gals. That was before the plague, though. 355 asks Allison, so do you think the plague was good for these women? And Allison says, it's never good or bad. It's about getting back to equilibrium. Allison and 355 then begin talking about Rose. Allison hasn't been fully forthcoming about everything that went down between her and Rose and her mother, but 355 says, look, if your mom is in some kind of trouble, Yorick and I can postpone our trip and come with you. Allison explains, actually, Rose isn't coming with her either. As soon as she's healthy enough to go back to Sydney on her own, I'm gonna leave her. And 355 says, oh, I thought you two are together. But Allison explains, yeah, and like every woman I've ever slept with, Rose has been less than forthcoming about her intentions. Allison explains that when Rose was delirious, she admitted that she joined our crew under orders from the Australian Navy. She's been spying on us for her superiors. 355 is shocked, and she yells at Allison saying, "And you left the last man on Earth along with a foreign agent?" Allison answers, "What was I supposed to do? Euthanize her?" If Rose wanted to hurt us, she would have done it ages ago. 355, though, now really concerned, begins running back to the house they are staying at, worried about Yorick. Allison, she goes to follow 355, but then she gets a pain in her stomach, just like the one she experienced last issue on the tanker when she was bleeding from between her legs. We jump over to New York. We see the Daughters of the Amazon have spotted Vlad, the son of Seba the astronaut, and want to kill this new male in the world. The Amazons are firing bow and arrows at Hero, Natalia, Seba, Beth from Cooksfield, and their children Vlad and Beth Jr. They are all on the run after having to abandon the Hot Suite lab in Kansas because of Alter Saleon. So they all manage to escape this confrontation with the Daughters of the Amazon shooting bow and arrows at them because they are on a steamboat headed to Europe, specifically to France, as that is where Yorick said he was headed in his brief phone call he had with Hero. Now, while this confrontation is going down, one of Alter Saleon's spies was surveying the docks, and she reports back to Alter that she has spotted Yorick's sister as well as the children. Back to 355. She runs back to their safe house that they are renting in China. All of a sudden, she hears Rose and Yorick talking and hears them saying, "Yeah, that's it. Harder, faster, so close, don't stop." As 355 enters the bedroom, she sees Ampersand and Bonnie are finally having sex. Yorick exclaims, "Quiet, 355. Ampersand is getting his cherry popped." Yorick explains that Rose was able to coax them into it. She's like an erotic monkey whisperer. 355 is still on guard about Rose, but Rose just seems genuinely happy to see 355. Rose hugs 355 and tells her that she's a sight for sore eyes. She misses the clacking of 355's and knitting needles. Later on that night, the four of them are celebrating their eventual parting of ways. They reminisce about their past adventures over the last few years. Yorick tells a story and says, "And then we were camping on that reservation in New Mexico, and I got kidnapped by a bunch of Native American women who thought I was a spirit god or something. Thankfully, Dr. Mann convinced them I was just a hermaphrodite." Allison cuts in on this story of Yorick's and says, "Actually, I said you are a woman with a rare form of Turner syndrome that encompassed a number of chromosomal abnormalities." Yorick says, "You know, my hilarious anecdotes about our past are a lot more hilarious when you're not here." Nevertheless, Yorick says he is going to miss Allison, and Allison says Yorick will be hard to miss when she is spending every waking hour trying to clone him. 355 hints to Allison about how she doesn't want Allison to say any more of their plans in front of Rose because Rose is spying on them. Allison doesn't care though, she continues talking. Rose, oblivious to 355's hints to Allison, she asks, no offense, but why Yorick when you can clone any guy from their corpse? Allison explains that she has no proof that Ampersand's monkey feces will work on every male. Yorick may have a unique genetic makeup that reacts to Ampersand's antibodies in a particular way. Yorick says, "So in the future, mankind is going to be made up entirely of me's? It's an abomination of science, of grammar." Allison says that Yorick's clones are just the first step. She'll create maybe 200 of them to start repopulating the Earth, but once it works, she'll get to work on cloning people like Al Gore and Johnny Depp. Yorick, he doesn't love the idea of potentially being the grandfather to so much of the planet, but Allison explains that 16 million people can trace their ancestry back to Genghis Khan. Of course, he had to rape and pillage his way across the entire Mongol Empire to sire that many descendants. All you had to do was get shit on. Rose leaves to head to bed. When Rose is alone in her room, she phones her captain in the Australian Navy. The captain asks Rose for more information, but Rose refuses. She is done. She says to her captain, "I nearly died, Captain Belleville, but these people risked their lives to save mine. Unlike the Royal Navy that time I was on board the Whale." The captain says that she swore an oath, but Rose says, "Yeah, to defend my homeland, and the best way we can do that is to stop worrying what's happening outside our borders and start concentrating on what's happening inside." Rose then hangs up on her captain, turning her back on the Australian Navy. Allison walks in, and Rose apologizes to Allison for lying to her earlier and not telling her the truth about spying on her. Allison thinks that Rose planned this entire theater, this conversation between her and her captain, just to throw Allison off and try and convince her that Rose is a changed person because she figured Allison was starting to catch on to her ruse. Rose says that it's true though, she didn't throw away her old life in the Navy as a stunt, she did it because she loves Allison. And Allison asks Rose, "Are you even gay?" And Rose replies, "Do I make love like a straight girl? How many times did I go down on you on our first night together?" Rose and Allison then begin to start getting closer together and start getting a little sexual. Rose starts fingering Allison, and Allison says, I don't care if you're telling the truth anymore. Just keep saying exactly what you're..." But then Allison, she screams out in pain. She starts bleeding from between her legs once again. Just like she did on the tanker last volume, Allison's health is really just spiraling now. She really needs help. Allison says to Rose, "I'm sorry, I'm sick and I don't have long. You have to go to a place called the Bioethics Institute in Hong Kong. There's a doctor named Ming there. She studied morphogenetic fields and I think she knows what caused the plague." Rose then says, Allison? As she holds Allison in her arms. 355 then walks into the room at this point and she's angry. She thinks that Rose hurt Allison and she points her gun at Rose and asks her, "What have you done?" Issue 50, Motherland, Part 2. We jump back 25 years to Yokogawa, Japan. Dr. Ming is injecting a little Allison with some needles. The injections are to help Allison with her many allergies that she suffered from as a child. Allison is sick of all these shots though. She tells her dad that she just wants to do her homework. But Dr. Ming tells Allison, "Wait to do it until just before your bedtime after your classmates have completed the assignment." And Allison asks why. And Allison's dad tells Ming, "Let's not have this conversation again, Ming." But Ming ignores Allison's dad and goes into her scientific theory on morphic resonance. And she wants to explain it to Allison. Ming explains, "A few years ago, a group of scientists were studying these Japanese monkeys on the island of Koshima. One of the primates there that they were observing learned to clean dirt off sweet potatoes by washing them in the sea, a skill he soon taught to the other primates there. By the time 100 of the animals learned to wash their food, something extraordinary happened. The practice spread to monkeys on another island called Takasakiyama." Allison asks, "How? Did one of the monkeys swim there to the other primates and teach them?" Ming explains, "No, it's called morphic resonance, the socio-biological interconnectedness of species. The spontaneous transmission of data at a genetic level explains a sudden massive leap forward in science and technology and evolution. It means our genes are receivers capable of transmitting and obtaining information through the unseen frequency that unites all life on the planet, like the invisible bond that holds atoms of a molecule together. It means that homework is easier to do in the evening because your fellow pupils will have already raised their collective consciousness because they have done it. We've come to think of it as instinct." Allison, hearing this theory, says, "That's stupid." Allison's dad agrees with Allison and says, "You're correct. Ming's story is most likely a myth. Scientists have studied the monkeys of which she speaks, but I highly doubt their traits were remotely passed to other animals." Her dad and Ming argue a bit, and then Allison's dad takes Allison away. So some of this science, this theory of morphic resonance, is going to tie into later with the plague and how that plague got transmitted across the globe. Back to the current day though, in China, 355 and Yorick talk with Rose and a delirious sick Allison. Allison manages to explain to them all about Ming and the Bioethics Institute, and they decide it is best to push forward to go to this Ming woman and see if she can help Allison. We jump to a battleship in the Atlantic Ocean. Alter and her crew have stolen it and are trying to intercept the boat with Yorick's sister and the children on board. One of Alter's subordinates, a woman named Eliana, she walks in and questions Alter and how truthful Alter is being. Eliana, she claims that this photo that Alter showed the Hartle twins at the end of last volume, Alter has also been showing that photo to various women as a recruitment tool, and that photo, it shows all these various other armies fighting over the last man in Sydney. Well, Eliana claims that this photo was doctored, it's not real. And Alter, she defends herself by yelling at Eliana, and Eliana says, "With all due respect, ma'am, most of the girls didn't join your mission to chase a man. They did it to bring peace to Alter." She then begins choking this Eliana and says to her, "You think I'm Ahab, eh? Hunting down some meaningless trophy? I'm not looking for a goddamn fish. I'm trying to secure the only leverage Israel has in the world that would rather see us wiped off the map. How dare you walk into this room with your self-righteous insinuations? I didn't tolerate that from Sadie, and she was the only friend I had in this piece of shit world. You remember Sadie, don't you? The woman you executed?" And Eliana replies through the choking done on her, "I was following your orders, Alter." So we learn here that Alter ordered Sadie to be killed, and she was killed off panel. Alter asks this woman, "Now, if you were just a stormtrooper following orders, you wouldn't have come to me like this. Why did you agree to gun down an unarmed judge?" She's referencing when the judge sentenced her and Alter asked them to kill that judge and free her. Eliana explains that you are a hero after the plague. You helped secure Israel's borders. But once the military was done with you, they locked you up. And Eliana and her allies felt that was wrong, so they freed Alter. And Alter tells her, "Do you think I'm insane?" Eliana says, "No, you're not insane." Alter lets her go and tells her, "Then why the hell am I letting you live? Go on, off to your bunk, put this back in your little scrapbook until you're ready to fill my boots," giving her that picture that Eliana said was doctored. "Go there until you're ready to do whatever it takes to drag girls to war." Alter is definitely a little unhinged. Alter, now alone, she points a gun to her head, contemplating ending it, but then she puts the gun aside and says, "Sorry, Sadie, not today." We jump back over to Yorick and his crew. 355 has hijacked an ambulance and they are speeding as fast as they can, trying to get Allison to help. 355 is heading to Hong Kong to the place that Allison mentioned. They arrive at their destination and head outside, and then when they are outside of the ambulance, Yorick, he gets shot in the neck with a dart and that knocks him out. 355 and Rose also get shot with darts. And then, who shot them with these darts? Toyota. Toyota walks over to them and she can't believe her luck. She says, "Dr. M is gonna love this." Allison wakes up. Her mother is caring for her and asking her, "Ayuko, can you hear me?" Ayuko is Allison's name in Japanese. Her mom in Japanese explains that her friends are okay. Yorick, he's tied up right here. We brought him in for observation. Yorick, he's freaking out, wondering what is going on and what everyone is saying around them because they're all speaking in Japanese. Allison's mom explains that Allison is recovering from surgery. Allison's mom had to remove Allison's uterus. She did what she could to preserve as much sexual response as possible, but Allison will no longer be able to carry children. Allison's mom explains that Allison's symptoms were identical to Dr. Ming's. Apparently, genetically engineered fetuses contribute to the development of tumors within the womb. Thankfully, you're younger and stronger than Ming was when she made her mistake. That prideful bitch was nearly 50 when she was impregnated. And Allison asks, Ming brought a human clone to term? Allison's mom explains that the reason Toyota brought her here was to save Ming's life because Ming developed complications much like Allison, bleeding from between her legs. But Ming, she was far too gone, and she died shortly before Allison's mom arrived. Allison asks, but if Ming is dead, then who the hell is that ninja whore working for? So if Ming is dead, who is Dr. M? Who is this Dr. M that has been working with Toyota this whole time? A voice says, hello, Ayuko. It's good to see you again. And in walks Allison's dad, still alive. He is the mysterious Dr. M. Yorick, seeing him, says, oh man, not another fucking robot. Allison's dad, Thomas, begins by apologizing for everything. Allison's mom asks Thomas not to tell her everything at once. She'll have a, Thomas says, interrupting his wife, I'll speak to our daughter as I please. Allison asks how he is still alive, and Thomas explains the same way that Mr. Brown is, although this isn't about him or his animal, but the people responsible for the plague, namely me and my offspring. Allison asks, what offspring? Me or the clones of yourself you shoved in Ming's belly? Allison's dad says, who said I ever tried to clone myself? Thomas, speaking through a curtain, says, Ayuko-ni, come here please. There's someone I'd like you to meet. In walks a little 4-year-old clone of Allison, and Allison asks, Jesus Christ, is she? Thomas answers, you at 4 years old? Yes, you are exactly this beautiful at her age. From early on, I knew I had failed you as a father, Ayuko. I'd failed you as a man, but I never stopped trying. We see Thomas has about 8 Allison clones in view. Issue 51, Motherland, Part 3. This issue opens up 15 years ago in Yokohama, Japan. A young Toyota is 15 years old. She is trying to steal stuff in Dr. Thomas Matsumori's lab. Thomas was able to apprehend her and put her in some sort of arm lock. Thomas asks her what is she doing in his laboratory. Toyota explains that she was just looking for downers and shit, some drugs. Thomas asks her where her parents are, and Toyota explains that they died in a tsunami in 1983. Thomas asks her, do you know who Tomo Gozen is? Toyota does not. Thomas explains that she was a female samurai in the time of the Genpai War. She was a loyal attendant to a general named Yoshinaka. Tomo Gozen mastered archery and Ketjutsu so that she could accompany her master into battle. And then Thomas asks Toyota, how would you like to study these same skills? And Toyota says, I'm not big into the whole classroom thing, thanks. But Thomas explains, this is no ordinary school. I learned of it from my assistant. It's a program that will teach you how to defend your life and the life of your employer. And Toyota questions, I'm 15 years old. Who's gonna employ me? And Thomas explains, I will. My work has already forced me out of one country, and Japan will not welcome me much longer. One day soon, I will require a competent security agent to escort me past those men and women small-minded enough to view my research as dangerous. Toyota, hearing his pitch, says, yeah, sure, I'll be your bitch for 1 million yen. And that is how she became Dr. M's personal ninja. Back to the current day. Toyota has 355 and Rose strung up and suspended by their arms on one of the upper floors of this building. Toyota explains that she trained with an organization called the Perfect Circle. It was founded back in 1940 in Japan as a countermeasure to 355's secret club, the Cobra Ring. Toyota only spent a few years at their lame dojo before she sold out and went corporate. Toyota is toying with them and deciding which one of them she is going to slice up first. Back over to Allison. She tells her dad, this is bullshit. Her dad tells her to watch her language. These clones may share your identical nature, but your sisters still need our nurture. Thomas tells his wife to take this little one back to the nursery with the others. As Allison's mom heads out, she tells Allison, I thought it was Ming who put all this into motion. I had no idea your father was even still alive. Yorick, he is in the room while all this conversation is going on, but they're all speaking in Japanese. So Yorick is frustrated and he has no idea what's going on. He starts yelling that if he's not let go soon, he will bust out of these restraints and kick your mustachioed ass, he says, talking to Thomas. But then Yorick mutters to himself, right after I find my stupid pen, which Yorick needs to escape from the restraints he is in. Back on the high floor, Toyota is still taunting 355 and Rose. Take note that 355 appears to have the pen that Yorick was looking for. Rose spits in Toyota's eye. Toyota wipes off the spit and says, I cannot wait to feed you your one good eye. 355, who has been playing with her handcuffs this entire time, finally manages to get out of them. 355 then tells Toyota, I am so goddamn tired of killing people. Toyota tells her, hey, looks like somebody learned a few tricks from Magic Fag, referring to Yorick, which, that's funny, Magic Fag. Toyota says, did the white boy also teach you how to take down a younger, sexier opponent? The only hardware I see you packing is those saggy tits. And 355 replies, yeah, well, it's everyone's worst enemy, gravity. 355 then begins charging towards Toyota and she tackles her off of the building through the glass window up there. Back over to Thomas, Allison, and Yorick. Allison asks, what the hell was that? They are hearing the noise of the fighting going on with Toyota and 355. Thomas says, I'm sure Toyota will look into it. And Allison asks, so that bitch works for you? And Thomas explained that he knew Allison's mother would be suspicious of him taking another young female into his employ, so he subcontracted Toyota to the late Dr. Ming. Yorick, his mind is going to concern for ampersand, and he asks, who gives a shit who's signing her checks, referring to Toyota? I'm not going to lose my monkey to that sociopath again. Thomas explains that ampersand is actually his monkey. He raised that animal from birth. Thomas then explains his whole history of cloning research. He says, Japan criminalized human cloning in the year 2000, so he was forced to leave his wife and move here to China where the laws are less defined. With funding from Dr. Ming's institute, he began working to create the first viable human clone from samples of Allison's genetic material he took years prior. He dreamed of having a second chance to raise her honorably. Despite her older age, Ming offered to carry the clone he designed to term. There were younger candidates he could have potentially chose, candidates that they would end up impregnating with later models of Allison's cloned embryos, but at the time, discretion took precedence over vigor. During his research, he discovered a unique chemical compound that seemed to have adverse effects on the genomes of cloned mammals, and when he received word that Allison was racing to complete her own genetic clone, he knew he had to sabotage her work. Allison asks her dad, you started your project to honor me, but as soon as you found out I was your competition, you decided to murder my baby? Thomas says it was his own shameful pride that led him to do that. He began looking for methods to halt his daughter's impressive progress, methods that even a mind such as hers would not be able to trace back to him. Thomas knew that Allison relied on Capuchin monkeys for her research, so he injected one with his formula and had it shipped to the lab where she recruited her samples from. It was his hope that the monkey would act as a vector, like the cats that transfer toxoplasmosis to pregnant women. But somehow the monkey that he sent to Allison ended up being lost in shipping and was somehow sent to Mr. Brown. Allison asks if Ampersand didn't end up with her until after she lost her child, then how did her child die? And what does any of this have to do with whatever caused the plague? To this, Thomas says, it's as both science and of the Buddha teach. Everything is one. Back to Toyota and 355. They are now on the rooftop, and both of them are armed with the Japanese pole weapon known as a naginata. They fight on the rooftop, countering each other's blows with the weapon. Eventually, after some back and forth, Toyota manages to knock 355's weapon out of her hands and down to the street below. Back over to Thomas. He explains that Toyota was his fail-safe plan. When his first plan appeared unsuccessful to stop Allison's pregnancy, he sent Toyota to America to handle this in a more conventional manner personally. See, Dr. Ming was days away from giving birth, and though Allison was weeks behind their efforts, he couldn't risk Allison reaching even premature delivery before they did. So he had Toyota lace one of Allison's meals with something that would give her an abortion and terminate her pregnancy. And that is why Allison had the miscarriage and lost the baby. Thomas says that hours later, Ming's contractions began in this very room. Labor-wise, it was surprisingly easy. What came next was not. The second his clone of Allison took her first breath, this global misery for which he is responsible began. Allison says that you don't know that, it could just be coincidence. But Thomas says that the gendercide may have appeared instantaneous, but by all accounts, the deaths that followed, the shockwave, spread just shy of that of 186,000 miles per second. And by his calculations, that makes these the very coordinates for ground zero for the plague. Allison asks, how can a disease travel at light speed? And Thomas explains that all life in the universe may not be connected, but all life on our planet is. Thomas eventually bought into Ming's research, and it convinced him that we are all surrounded by a biological equivalent of an electromagnetic field. Essentially that morphic resonance theory that Ming explained the last issue in the flashback. So that is sort of how the plague transferred. Thomas explains, so one day, a group of chimpanzees learned to smash open nuts with a stone hammer, and across the river, thousands of miles away, other chimpanzees suddenly know how to use the same tool. One day, a single man unlocks the secret of asexual human reproduction, and across the planet, men are instantly rendered extinct. There is no denying that evolution is a process in which we are all actively involved. It's survival of the fittest, and something out there has decided that males were no longer fit to survive. Yorick asks, so if your immaculate conception killed all the men, then the stuff that you injected into Ampersand was to prevent someone else's virgin birth, but it somehow had the opposite effect and kept us both alive? Thomas explains that men have long been a necessary evil for the continuation of the species, but the moment that evil became obsolete, nature righted its course. He was merely the trigger that set off a time bomb that's been ticking for a millennia. Allison starts falling asleep as Thomas begins to increase the flow of morphine into Allison. Thomas says he wants to talk with Yorick alone, man to man. Jumping back over to the rooftop, Toyota and 355 are continuing their fight. 355 asks Toyota, why are you doing this? Toyota explains that Dr. M is Allison Mann's father, and he is going to help her live forever. She says this as she hits 355 with her weapon, and the end part of her pole breaks off. 355 tells her she's an idiot. Toyota says that's what she told Dr. M, but then he showed her all these test tube brats he engineered. He says he's only going to make copies of certain girls, and she's going to be one of them. So 1,000 years from now, there will still be a whole line of women exactly like her walking the planet. She will never really die. 355 says, then I don't feel so bad about what's going to happen next. 355, with the jagged broken piece of Toyota's weapon in her hands, runs at Toyota and stabs her in the ear with it. Toyota falls to the ground, most likely dead. But it looks like, before she got stabbed, Toyota managed to stab 355 with her naginata weapon. Back to Thomas and Yorick. Thomas says that he's not an evil man. He's done terrible things in his life, but this was an accident. He vowed to find Yorick's pet and do whatever he could to bring mankind back to the planet, but over the last 4 years, he's watched the women of this country make such remarkable progress without men. He asks Yorick, is it like that all over the world? And Yorick replies, I don't know, I guess so, whatever. I just want to find my girlfriend, her name is Beth. Thomas explains that Dr. Ming, the woman that he loved, died in his arms just a few days after his wife arrived. It reminded him what a cruel creature men are. Thomas says, our bodies tell us to love so many, but there's room in our hearts for so few. We're impossibly flawed animals, aren't we? Anyway, Allison can continue my work. She and her mother will see that women live on beyond this generation, but you and I, we didn't belong in this world before the plague, and we certainly don't belong here now. Thomas, he then reaches into his coat pocket and pulls out a needle. He tells Yorick, it's time for us to go. He intends to kill Yorick and then himself. Issue 52 of Motherland, Part 4. Hero, Natalia, Siba, and Beth from Cooksfield arrive in France from the steamboat that they were on. They are going to stay together for now until they find Yorick. Back to Yorick and Thomas. Thomas keeps pontificating about how Yorick and him don't belong in a world of women, but Yorick, arguing back, fearing for his life, says, look, a few years ago, I would have been totally down with your suicide pact. I made up all sorts of excuses about how offing myself and leaving this world of the ladies would be noble and selfless. Every guy goes through a period where he's scared shitless and completely baffled by girls, right? But then we're supposed to grow up, figure out that the best place for all the great women probably isn't behind every great man. The two sides are only going to get through this together. So why don't you stop being such a pussy and man the fuck up? Thomas argues if we belonged in this world, the gendercide never would have happened. And Yorick argues back, oh, sell that if man were meant to fly bullshit to somebody else. Maybe God or Buddha or Xenu or whoever didn't give us wings, but he did give us enough gray matter to build DC-10s, right? So yeah, maybe there is a reason he or she or it wiped out every other penis on the planet, but that means there's also a reason the two of us got left behind. Yorick's arguments don't work on Thomas though, and he heads over to Yorick to begin injecting him with the needle that will kill him. But just then, Allison pops out of her bed. Apparently, she unhooked her morphine drip the second her dad walked into the room. She tells him, you never did pay enough attention to me. Allison is holding a scalpel and she is slowly moving towards her father. Back to the rooftop. Rose is screaming and yelling for help. Allison's mom eventually makes her way to the roof, but she tells Rose to be quiet because this Toyota woman might hear and she's dangerous. Allison's mom then sees that 355 and Toyota have fallen down onto the roof below them. She sees Toyota dead, but she sees 355 there and she says, we have to get her into surgery right away. Back to Thomas. Thomas says to his daughter Allison, I don't want to hurt you, but as always, if I must. Allison, holding the scalpel, says, over the last 4 years, I have cleaned Yorick's wounds and emptied his bedpans, set his broken bones, and cured him of a dozen different kinds of food poisoning. I have invested way too much of my medical genius on his pimpled ass to lose him on the table now. Thomas asks his daughter to just let him finish what he started. Allison tells her dad, Go ahead, but know that I will spend the rest of my natural life working to bring men, even assholes like you, back to this planet. Her dad says that she won't. The first cloned girl killed all the men. What makes you think the first cloned boy won't kill all the women? Allison says back, no, fuck that. A girl didn't destroy mankind, you did. You were reckless and sloppy, and you let your ego get in the way of your science. And her dad asks, and how are you any different? And Allison replies, because I learned from my mistakes. I care about people other than myself, and I owe it to them to get this right. And I will get this right. Her dad says to her, you know, cutting your umbilical cord was the last time I was ever truly happy. I don't know why. And then he punches Allison in the stomach. Allison falls to the floor, but just then, one of the Allison clones walks into the room and says, scared, I heard noises. And Thomas tells the clone to get back to the nursery now. But while he is distracted, Allison charges at her dad and stabs him with the needle he was going to inject into Yorick. Thomas falls down to the ground, and then Allison, she goes over to her clone and hugs her and tells her how sorry she is. 2 weeks later, after all these reveals and confrontations have passed, we see that 355 is resting and recovering. Allison is there to greet her when 355 wakes up. Allison tells 355 that the blade that cut into her severed both of her fallopian tubes, so she can never be a mother. 355 laughs. She says, seriously? Oh, thank Christ. I thought you were going to tell me I was paralyzed or something. I mean, it's not like anyone's around to get me pregnant. Unless you were expecting me to carry one of your cloned boys, were you? Allison says, no, Rose has selflessly volunteered for that line of duty. She's aware of the possible complications, but she has faith in my work. 355 apologizes for not having faith in Rose, as Rose risked her life to help her back in Hong Kong. 355 says that Rose is a good woman. So if you're not looking for a birthing surrogate, who did you think I'd ever make babies with? And Allison says, 355, I recognized it the second you two first set foot in my lab back in Boston. I think it's time to admit that you're in love with Yorick. And 355 replies to this, what the fuck? We've been over this. I know I muttered something to that effect the last time I was in one of your sick beds, but that was just... But Allison interrupts and says, because you confused your protective instincts with romantic feelings? No, that's why you slept with me, but there's something else going on with you and him, whether you want to admit it to yourself or not. 355 ignores this and says, look, I get people where they need to be, and right now Yorick needs to be with his girlfriend. Allison, she says, okay, if you say so. I just hope you find time to get yourself where you need to be. And then the two of them, speaking in their secret Pig Latin language that it was established that they speak in earlier volumes, they say I love you to each other. We see that Yorick and Rose are talking outside. Rose breaks the news to Yorick that she has volunteered to be one of the surrogates that will eventually give birth to Yorick's clone. Yorick's reaction to this is to ask, wait, so you're gonna be my mom? Wow, my mother's gonna be a smoking hot lesbian. It's a Freudian nightmare. Yorick concludes, anyway, try to be patient with him, okay? Your son is going to be a naive, self-righteous douche for the first few years, but he should be completely awesome by the time he's like 45. Allison comes outside to say goodbye to Yorick. Her and Rose are going to head back to the nursery with the clones, and Yorick and 355 are going to be heading to France by train once 355 is up for travel. As they are preparing to say goodbye, Yorick says to Allison, in all the years we've been playing hard-traveling heroes, I don't think I've ever seen you smile once. What's a guy have to do to change that? Allison then begins to cry, and Yorick, he apologizes. He says that he was just being sarcastic, but Allison replies, the times I have spent with you and your stupid monkey have been among the unhappiest of my life. I have no idea why I'm going to miss you so much. Listen to me, you have a big heart. Yorick cuts her off and says, stop. This has been sappy enough. I want to remember you belittling my many shortcomings, not leaving me with a compliment. But Allison continues, enlarged hearts are weak and fragile, Yorick. It wasn't a compliment, it was a warning. Whatever happens in France, you just stay strong, okay? And Yorick says, yeah, good luck saving the world, Allison. And Allison says, same to you, Mr. Brown. And they both hug and cry. We jump over to France. We see Beth from Australia is walking around with a picture of her and Yorick, and she is showing it to people on the street, wondering if they've seen Yorick. Issue 53, The Obituarist. For the rest of this volume, we are ignoring Yorick and our main cast, and we are going to revisit some minor characters we met along the way and see what they are up to. This issue focuses on the ex-supermodel Waverly, now a corpse disposer, who Yorick ran into all the way back in issue 2. This issue opens in Virginia months ago. Some women are digging in a cemetery, and they run into a girl named Bobby. Bobby was a character Yorick ran into back in Volume 3, Issue 11. She is a transgender male, woman passing for a man, who was a prostitute for the women of the post-plague world, wanting to be with a man. Bobby commented to Yorick about how he almost looked passable for a male and his beard looked good. We see Bobby had a pretty scraggly looking fake beard. The two women in the cemetery are angry that Bobby is pretending to be a male as they spout some anti-male Amazon woman propaganda at Bobby. Bobby pleads, saying he'll make love to them if they want. Everyone tells her equipment feels real. Bobby pleads that he just came here to the cemetery to visit his dad's grave. She never had a chance to visit her dad when he was alive. The angry women are getting ready to beat Bobby, but Waverly shows up and shoots a gun into the sky, and she tells the two women to step off. She tells the women to get back to work as Waverly helps Bobby up from the ground. Bobby asks Waverly if she is a daughter of the Amazon, and Waverly says she is not. But she started luring those Amazon women away from a life of blowing up monuments and burning down sperm banks by offering those women actual work and a career with her. She explains that the government pays her and her crew to dispose of all the male corpses that manage to fall through the cracks. They get into Waverly's car and she drives Bobby, and Waverly comments that this one time she thought she had a conversation with a real guy, referring to Yorick way back when, but Waverly thinks that she was just hallucinating or something because she ran out of these meds this plastic surgeon she was nailing used to give her. Bobby asks her if she is sure because the newspapers have been running this picture of this living male that was spotted in Australia, and Waverly says, oh, she doesn't read those rags. Everything on them was fake, which is kind of interesting because that is exactly what Yorick said to 355, that would be the reaction of a lot of the women that would see his picture in the paper and they would just not believe it. Waverly and Bobby continue driving down the road. Waverly says that she got a call from a woman saying that her husband used to work in the sewers and she asked if his body could be collected. So Waverly, she stops the car and heads over to this manhole sewer cover in the street and pops it open. They both then climb down into the sewers. Bobby, now in the sewer with Waverly, says that if she sees a rat, she's out of here. Waverly explains that the rats only live for about 36 months tops, and since the plague killed off every male mammal, all the rats should have died years ago. As they are looking through the sewers, Waverly gets a call that there is a body down at Congress that they need picked up. This is the body of Yorick's mom, Jennifer Brown. So Waverly, she abandons this sewer call and she shows up at the Capitol with Bobby, and she gets introduced to the president as well as the president's Secretary of Defense. They are brought to the body of Jennifer Brown, and the Secretary of Defense says they'll be handling the investigation of the death, but they're paying Waverly to take care of the funeral arrangements for Jennifer. Waverly, she recognizes in the photograph on Jennifer's desk a picture of Yorick as the man she met many years ago. Next, we jump to the Watergate Hotel, where Waverly is staying and she and Bobby just had sex. Waverly, talking to Bobby, says that, I know I sound more insane than ever, but It took a dead woman to tell me maybe I'm not the bipolar lunatic I've always thought I was, and for that, I think she deserves something better than just another hole in the dirt. Her family deserves something better. Waverly, she feels Jennifer was important and feels she's earned a funeral with class. We see the funeral procession of Jennifer Brown as she gets carted down the streets of Washington in a horse-drawn procession, with the American flag draped over her coffin. After the funeral, Bobby comments that Waverly did really good, and the newspapers are saying that this ceremony is going to remind people that the government is still working for them. Maybe even inspire more girls to get involved in local politics. Bobby, he freaks out a bit though as he sees some rats alive in a nearby garbage can scurrying about, which should be impossible as all the rats died years ago. They both see this return of the rats as maybe some sort of sign that society will go on. Bobby says, if we start acting like it's not the end of the world anymore, sooner or later maybe it won't be. We jump in time a bit. Waverly and Bobby have been together working for the last several months. Waverly has a contract to clean up this makeshift crematorium that is in RFK Stadium, as the government wants to turn it into some sort of solar energy plant or something. However, the old fires they used in the crematorium to burn the bodies were never really hot enough to completely burn all the boys, so the two of them are going to have their work cut out for them with the cleanup. Bobby tells Waverly that these past few months have been really special, but she's not built to do what Waverly does, and Waverly asks Bobby, are you quitting? And Bobby says she's gonna go back to Missouri to do the only thing she's ever been good at. We assume she's referring to prostitution. Waverly, though, she grabs Bobby by the face and rips off her beard and tells her, you are better than that, Bobby. The days of us selling our tits and ass are over. You're smart, okay? Way smarter than me. You have brains and heart and an unknowingly kind spirit. Me and you finally have a shot to be more than whatever everyone else used to see us as. We can be more than just bodies. Issue 54, Tragicomic. Now we will check in again with the Fish and Bicycle Theatre Troupe, whom we first spent time with in Volume 3, Issues 16 and 17 in the Comedy and Tragedy storyline. That story was the one about the group of women putting on a play about the world's last man. So, we see some women on the street with machine guns. They are firing on some other women taking cover by a car. They just robbed a sperm bank and got away with the last sample of male man spunk on Earth that was shielded from the plague virus. But some daughters of the Amazon are shooting at them and ask them to hand over the seed, sister. The blonde woman fights off the Amazons, but she gets shot in the chest. The blonde woman is the actress Edie. As she appears to get shot in the chest, she complains, "Ugh, I told them to be more careful with their squibs. I have very sensitive nipples." Case Thomas, the director of the movie, who was previously the director of the Last Man play, she yells, "Cut!" It is revealed that the Fish and Bicycle Theatre Troupe have now gone Hollywood and are filming a movie. Case, she chastises Edie for ruining their shot. One of the other actresses, named Velvet, she's playing an Amazon in the movie, and she used to be a real daughter of the Amazon in real life. Case casted her because she wanted real ex-daughters of the Amazon to play Amazons in the movie. Well, Velvet, she complains that her dialogue is so lame. Case, the director, flips out and says, "What do you mean?" And Velvet says, "You told us that this movie was going to be empowering to women so that they wouldn't decide to join a gang like the Daughters of the Amazon like I did. But this is nothing but another garbage action movie, exactly what the patriarchy used to churn out." Case rebuttals and says, "That's not true at all, Velvet. We're appropriating the trappings of male-dominated cinema and subverting them to make the first truly female action hero." The other women argue back, "Well, what about Tomb Raider or that lady from Alien?" Case explains that Laura Croft, or Tomb Raider, is just a teenage boy's masturbatory fantasy. Even strong women characters like Ripley from Alien were forced to strip down to their underpants to satisfy male viewers. Edie argues that Sarah Connor was pretty hardcore, and in Terminator 2, she never even showed her bush. Case says, "That's not the point, Edie. those movies were all made by men for men. Her movie, On Fertile Ground, is different. Velvet says, whatever, it's still crap. Come on, we're going back to the grotto. And Kay says, wait, you're quitting my movie so you can work at the Playboy Mansion? And Velvet explains, it's a hospice now. And say what you will about the bunnies, but at least they're helping people. This make-believe nonsense isn't helping Jack. Case is angry because they all signed contracts. Henrietta, though, one of Case's other friends from the Fish Bicycle Theatre Troupe, she tries to comfort her friend Case. Edie, one of the other actresses, though, she announces that she too is thinking of leaving. She wants to go back to Broadway. She loved when they were touring the country, putting on the Last Man play for packed theaters, but she didn't sign up for shootouts and car chases. Case says, but even when we were playing 2 full houses when we were doing our play, we only reached a few hundred women a week. Now that the electricity is coming back, we have a chance to talk to millions. Edie says that she'd rather do something great for a few people than something dumb just to be palatable for the masses. Case angrily says, then I guess if everybody feels this way, then Fish and Bicycle Pictures is officially dead. Later on that day, Case and Henrietta are driving home, and they comment about how Hollywood and Los Angeles was not everything they hoped it would be, and how their film has fallen apart. As they are driving, there are some young girls in the middle of the road. Case slams on the brakes on the van they are driving. They get out of their van and ask these girls what are they doing playing in the middle of the goddamn road. The little girl in the street pulls out a gun and fires it as proof that it is real. They then move to steal Case's van, and Case comments that she didn't think the Amazon started recruiting little girls before. The little girl with the gun says back, psh, those dykes are yesterday's weak sauce, lady. The future belongs to the father-fucking Last Girls, which is the name of their gang, the Last Girls. The Last Girls then ride off with Case's van. Case and Henrietta, having their van being stolen, they walk for a while to get back into town, and they make their way to a statue of Amelia Earhart, the first female aviator to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean. They sit down by the statue and rest and take in a smoke. Henrietta is reading a comic book that one of the little girl robbers had with her and dropped while they were making a run for their van. Case looks at the comic book and thinks that, you know what? This comic book may actually be a good medium for her story, and it's certainly cheaper than making a movie. And Henrietta is an artist after all and wanted to get back to painting so she could do the art for the comic book. Case says, this is the cheapest way to get our unfiltered vision into as many hands as possible. Case then looks up into the sky and dreams of the possibility. Some time passes and we see a glimpse of Case and Henrietta's comic book. In it, a woman is traveling the apocalypse-ridden post-plague streets on a horse named Earhart. The woman walking by her horse removes her helmet and reveals herself to be a woman with long brown hair. The woman in the comic talking to her horse says, "It's just me and you now, girl." And we see the credits for the story called I Am Woman, written by Case and Henrietta. We jump to the current day now. We see Yorick and 355 are now on a train heading through China. Yorick, he is reading that comic book. Apparently Rose gave it to him. Supposedly it's all the rage now back in the United States. Yorick says he's heard it's the best-selling series since old school Superman back in the 1940s. Although, best-selling is relative, especially when the cover price is whatever donation you and your shopkeeper feel is fair. 355 asks, well, what's the book about? And Yorick answers, well, this isn't a cape and tights kind of book. It's this quasi-feminist sci-fi thing, very postmodern. And 355 asks, if you are an English major, why can't you speak English? Is it any good or not? And Yorick says, meh, as he puts the book down. And that is the end of the volume. Alright, so that was volume 9, a very satisfying volume. Lots of answers given, lots of big reveals. So Dr. Ming is dead. And we learn that Dr. Allison Mann's dad, Thomas, is in fact still alive. So that's a big twist there when you see the reveal of her dad in the flesh and all the many Allison clones that he created. So just huge monumental shift in the storyline when we see that reveal there. And we had lots of scientific mumbo jumbo explanation by Thomas about his cloning work and his theory about how he caused the plague. And just to summarize that theory of his once again, so he created the Allison clones, and when he created that first clone, Mother Nature figured out that she no longer needs the male species anymore because women can just do it by themselves. So Mother Nature wiped out all the males. At least that's the theory that Thomas would have us believe. But somehow, because of his work with Ampersand, he was able to survive as well as Yorick. But yeah, it's not the definitive theory, but it's probably the best theory we have at the moment for what caused the plague. Then we had Thomas decide that men should no longer be in the world, so he goes to kill himself and Yorick. But Allison manages to stop her dad and kill him and save Yorick. So a pretty epic, satisfying conclusion with that whole storyline there. Then we had some of 355 and Toyota battling, which I thought was really fun, and we got to see 355 take down Toyota, so that was very good. Then we had the very touching goodbye and the parting of ways of Yorick, 355, Rose, and Allison. They are now officially going in opposite directions. And the scene between Yorick and Allison I thought was really touching and good. And then I liked the side stories we had, revisiting past characters. I liked visiting Waverly again and seeing her adjust to this post plague world. In the pre plague world, she was just this supermodel used for her body. But now she feels like she can be so much more and her looks don't matter. And she can be this businesswoman that has this corpse disposal business. And she really feels that she has much more value in this post plague world. So that's interesting. And then I liked revisiting the Fish and Bicycle Theatre Troupe. I really enjoyed their storyline back in Volume 3, seeing them put on the play. And I liked revisiting them and seeing them explore Hollywood now and see what Hollywood would be like in this post plague world. But of course, that kind of fell apart. And Case and Henrietta turned to comic books and put their comic book out. So I thought that was a fun little direction to end that story on. And then also, it was funny, York, his review of their comic was meh. So that was funny. Yeah, this was a really good volume. I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10. Really maintaining that quality in Y the Last Man. Great stuff. So thank you all for watching, and I will be back next week for Volume 10.